Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The Week That Was from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Our date is the 2nd of November, 2019. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Very interesting week, as most are, some more interesting than other weeks here. The soap opera, commonly called the impeachment saga, continues in Washington. We won't spend a lot of time with it. In South Africa, they were the winners of the Rugby Cup. Historically, rugby in South Africa has been a European sport. The captain of the current team is a black South African, and we use the term a little differently in South Africa than we do in, say, the U.S. or in London. We would use an African American and an African Londoner. Anyway, nonetheless, the last time they won the trophy was in 1995, I believe, in 96. It was the first year that Nelson Mandela was the president. He'd come out of prison after 27 years of fighting for the liberation of African people. The next time South Africa won the cup was under Mr. President Mbeki, and Mbeki was the president at that time. I recall when Mandela actually went out there to greet the rugby players, which were Europeans at the time. So this is a change through sport, and a little more towards the reflection of what South Africa was meant to be. However, though South Africa is still a highly stratified class economy, much inequality exists in South Africa. I remember when a guy named Bites, we were talking, that was during the apartheid regime. He was a South African, and he said, well, one of the big problems there, and it wasn't talked about in North America in the media, we were campaigning in the divestiture to break down apartheid, and also at the same time to free Nelson Mandela. It was the large middle class that had developed in apartheid South Africa, and they tend to have been on steroids since the liberation of apartheid and the breakdown of the apartheid regime in South Africa. That's that large middle class there that has gotten larger, but the inequality has become more. The people that live in these vast ghettos like Soweto are still in Soweto. So in other words, that has not changed. and we've not seen any change in that part of South Africa at all. Moving to the U.S., we had the World Series. Congratulations again to the Washington Nationals. They won Game 7, 6-2 in Houston, Texas. They had their parade on a Saturday, paraded through the streets of Washington, D.C. in buses. And this team is slated to appear at the White House on a Monday. We don't have the final count on how many players will not appear. Sean Doolittle, one of the relief pitchers, will not appear. He's decided that the actions of DJ Trump are not compatible with his moral outlook, period, and his politics. He and his wife have both supported GBLT causes and other progressive type of causes. So Mr. Doolittle of Pennsylvania will not be there for this situation. And coming up this week, on Tuesday, elections in Kentucky. That's Blevin. He's running for re-election there in Kentucky against Andy Beshear, the son of the former governor. Beshear, very popular governor, was a Democrat in Kentucky. He was a man that had the Kentucky Care site, and also he brought in Medicaid in Kentucky. He expanded it, and Blevin has contrasted it. Now, this is a very interesting situation. The health care program that the people of Kentucky once had is now not totally dead, but almost dead because of the types of income requirements that he has placed there and superficial work requirements. Those are akin to the various types of draconian voter restrictions, voter IDs, because they know that seniors, working people, African Americans, and people in of color generally do not have identity papers, as they would be called in some nations, or a driver's license or whatever, as many other people would be forced to have. So cities like Newark, New Jersey have their own city IDs, and that has been moving very slowly. There was a drive to have a national ID that would be based on your social security number, which would be changed, more like we have for Medicare. But nonetheless, that would be the number, and that would be the ID from birth. And that would cover Americans. They would have this centralized ID. Now they have a law called the Real ID law, which most states have complied with. This is an ID that is much more difficult to duplicate, is more akin to a passport. There are some more biometrics involved there than were involved in some of the state driver's license regiments. However, there is a lot of information in that particular database that people don't understand. Under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, there was some matrix established there. One was identifiers. One was a phone number, depending on how long you had the particular number, an address, and a credit rating. Most people didn't know about that. From the credit rating agencies, if you had bad credit or any credit at all, that would show them where you obtained that credit. If you applied for a credit card or anything, that you bought credit. So that, coupled with whatever form of identification, it could be a voter registration card, or it could be other types of identification, utility bills, etc. In other words, those were all known as metrics. So that is what is in Kentucky. In the state of Mississippi, you have Jim Hood, who is out of the Tupelo area. That was the birthplace of Elvis Presley and the rock and roll or rockabilly area there. A very rich cultural area in around Tupelo. DJ Trump was there in Tupelo, encouraging people to vote Republican and to accelerate the turnout there in Mississippi. It was done prior to that in other states where they were able to go in and bring the turnout up to what it would normally would have been. So you get an extra 3 or 4% turnout, sometimes as much as 5, in a very, very close race, toss-up race. The polls hasn't been much polling. We'll look at that and have a much more full report out of Mississippi on the Monday morning quarterback. We'll get that race in. Hood has been the Attorney General for the last 16 years. He is pro-abortion, and he's basically in line a moderate type of quote-unquote Democrat there. He's a Second Amendment type. Incidentally, they had a demonstration in Washington, special Second Amendment type group, a newer group, because of the chaos of all places at the National Rifle Association, NRA. How will that affect the election? Well, we don't know. It's one of the things we've been looking at in terms of our modeling, is the NRA factor, and those types of PACs playing in there. The other bombshell wasn't really a bombshell, but the ending of Beto O'Rourke of his presidential campaign. He ended in Iowa. We'll have a statement from Beto in this broadcast. A lack of resources, and also tenor of the campaign. He was attacked early on very trivial things, such as something that happened in his youth. There was an accident there. It was not, no one was killed, but the whole point was they tried to claim, well, he left the scene of the accident. He never substantiated this. This is where the rumors put out there never substantiated, and is very difficult to deny it. It occurred. The police record did not find him at fault there, but he was driving under the influence at the time. So that was one of the things that started contributing there, and then various other little things that came up, such as his campaign style and his lack of specificity, we'll call it, on certain issues. But once again, presidential candidates and politicians in general have broad outlines of issues, and the policy is later formulated by the Congress, not by the administration. The administration, yes, can submit policies or proposals, but they're hammered out in the Congress, and politicians should make that clear to people, as in the case of Elizabeth Warren. But Elizabeth Warren, being a policy wong, put out her Medicare for All program, and it is full of specifics as to how they will pay for it. We'll probably have a special review. We'll have more again on that one on the Monday morning quarterback as we look at that particular situation. While we are here, we'll get to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been also wounded, and Joe Biden is running around Iowa wounding people, lying about Medicare for All and how it would affect seniors that are on Medicare now. This was a common trick that the Trump administration tried to do, and the Republicans were doing during the legislation that formed Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. The late, great Jerry Pippin commented about that. The longer that people were exposed to Obamacare, they would like it, in which that turned out. But there were also pitfalls there. We recall the site itself was sabotaged, these kinds of things, and that depressed the enrollment the first few years. And of course, now what we have is the deliberate suppression by the Trump administration, shorter periods to enroll, less advertisement out there. And just remember, this is the enrollment period in the state exchanges, etc. And we'll have those precise dates in the next broadcast. It is also the enrollment period, the month of November, for Medicare. If you want to switch plans, there's, of course, original Medicare, which most of us have, and there's those so-called Medicare Advantage programs out there also. So all of that is out there. But back to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Karl Rove is writing about that. Basically what Karl Rove says is, it won't go away. Old Joe Biden was on 60 Minutes. But the problem is when you go in, and this was the problem that Hillary Clinton had, with the Hillary server. Those kinds of allegations put you at a disadvantage. It can be 2 or 3% in as much as 5 percentage points. Usually it's about 2 or 3% that you immediately become an underdog there because people believe it. Now, the situation with Hunter Biden, people really don't know very much about Hunter Biden, other than some of his career was a bit dodgy. Not that he's a criminal or anything of that nature. It's the appearance of things. You get a job, as he did, a fairly lucrative job with the Ukrainian oil company, but not only that, with a Chinese firm, and how much experience he had or didn't have is very debatable. And this kind of thing doesn't fly in 2019. So that's an evaluation that people have to immediately do. And as the polls get closer and closer, and we'll have some polls here, they say in a margin of, we'll say 5%, Joe Biden is in trouble. And if it's a 3 or 4% advantage for Joe Biden, and that's in some of the polls with Liz Warren, some of the polls with DJ Trump, those are generally in the margin of error. And what that basically equates to is Biden is in trouble. There's no doubt about that. Now, some of these polls say out of South Carolina, where the Democratic Party there is composed of followers of O.J. Simpson, in other words, African people, it doesn't really matter. He could be leading by 100 points. That's impossible, but the whole point there is that is the primary doesn't matter at all. Many of the states he will have to go to, he cannot depend on the followers of O.J. Simpson to get him over the finish line, so to speak. So in Iowa, and that has a lot to do with it, who leaves Iowa, there used to be 3 seats, now there could be 4 or 5. And of course with Beto leaving, from our perspective, we of course support Bernie Sanders. And our second choice would be Liz Warren, and the third choice was Beto O'Rourke. Now that Beto is gone, that post goes to Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who is a liberal. They call him moderate. We won't quibble on moderate, liberal, or whatever. Type of person there, the way she has formed some of her programs. She is for the public option, which the late, great Jerry Pippen also supported. So there's some of the things going on here. But this Hunter Biden story, yes, that is a drag on us, and we'll be looking at it from the progressive community. Now, let's be clear. I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, but we do have some progressive candidates in the race running, and we have to look at that overall race and the dynamics of the race to see which way the people are going. You can't pick and choose where political landscape will lead you. You have to look at the final dynamic, as we did in 2016. We had Hillary the Monster Clinton on the ticket, and DJ Trump. We decided to go with Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. But that did not mean that we went around telling people, no, do not vote for the monster, or do not vote for DJ Trump. We obviously didn't endorse DJ Trump, nor we endorsed him this time around, and we presented his presidency as dismal, period. But again, the Democratic line up there, and that's what hurt Beto. So many candidates. The mass media and the capitalists-to-be out there, backers, try to determine who they would go with. Well, Biden being a quote-unquote proven middle-of-the-road, compromising, backstabbing operator, they heavily favored him. And they had various other characters in there. Tom Stanger, he's, of course, a billionaire, so he can float his own campaign, and various other characters they had in the race early on who have since fortunately disappeared. But where does that leave Kamala Harris? Well, Kamala Harris is swimming and not out of it yet, but she's cutting staff right and left. She will no doubt be leaving soon because she's on the water even in her home state of California. Senator Booker of Jersey just has not caught on. The wrong time for him, but he's, 50 years old or whatever, he can make a return. And then you have some gravitation in some polls towards the Little Pete of South Bend, a middle-of-the-road conservative candidate out there, totally put out there, according to some, and he has some of the staff members from Facebook. So you have to watch who these candidates are and where their support is coming from and how they are treated in the media. Now, we'll be looking very, very carefully to see how Joe Biden is being treated in the media. Are they going to run Hunter Biden for president or Joe Biden for president? That we shall see. Let me continue on here. We've covered sport and continues to roll along. We'll go to the LA Times as we usually do on this particular one. This is the Hillside Fire, Santa Paula there, and of course fire in the south of California, Southern California, there called Marina Fire. That is going on. That's about 30%. And then we go up to Northern California. That's containment. That fire is at about 70 to 72% contained in Northern California. But let me just get to LA Times here. Hannah Fry is here, as has been. This is in Ventura County. Helicopter pilots radioed that a drone had been spotted flying. They're having problems above the flames, apparently trying to take a photo or video of the scene. Those have been some problems because the drones keep the planes down, and of course you can buy Kmart. This is a Marina Fire. Of course they were grounded. Blaze that broke out atop South Mountain, just south of Santa Paula. I'm not sure where Santa Paula is, but it comes into the situation there. We had an article by Patty Davis. Now that was the late President Reagan's library. Marina Fire, 7,000 acres in just a few hours, and there is more of those now, and evacuations, of course, are going on. And firefighting aircrafts like water dropping helicopters, super scooper planes typically dip 150 to 200 feet above the ground when dumping their loads. In the event of a drone, a collision, this is the problem there. There's only so much room to have the aircrafts run safely, according to a deputy chief with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. McLearn, who he is or was. Drones have a cause for concern for California firefighters for several years. In 2015, the legislature passed a bill that allowed firefighters to destroy drones and impede their efforts to battle fires, and imposed and created penalties for drone operators, but they fined them, I suppose. Anyway, that is one of those same things. The same year, the state launched a public service camp. If you fly, we can't, in the Cal Fire situation there. So already we have these problems going on here. The FAA prohibits recreational drone users from flying near emergencies, any type of accidents, etc., but they are still flying. And very little you can do about it, because they can go up in minutes and disappear within minutes also. And that is the end of that. See what else we have here. And we'll come back to this one. Let's get GitHub in here. We were going to do GitHub on the open source report. We'll do it here. GitHub again that's owned by Microsoft, trying to quell employees' anger over its ICE contract. The GitHub chief executive Nat Fryman, announced in October his company would donate $500,000 to nonprofit profits helping communities affected by the Trump administration's immigration policies. Employees had recently learned that the Microsoft-owned software development platform had renewed a 2016 contract with ICE. In donating the money, making clear his personal disagreement with harsh immigration enforcement, Fryman appeared intent to avoid an internal protest of sort that has affected other technology firms whose software powers controversial government programs. GitHub, after promising a to address the issue on ICE relationship at a Q&A that was on the 11th of October. Executives canceled the meeting, blaming the cancellation on employee leaks, according to an email reviewed by the LA Times. At an all-hands meeting that was held recently on the 24th of October, executives discussed results of a quarterly survey showing negative sentiment towards GitHub's leadership as planned, according to two workers. So there's problems at GitHub here, and we learned from a number of nonprofits and refugee advocates that one of the greatest challenges of facing immigrants is a lack of technology at ICE and related agencies, resulting in low case files and court date notifications of not being delivered, etc., etc. It was signed by the leadership there in, Bresker's letter was a second response to an open letter from workers called on GitHub to cancel its contract with ICE. In other words, he's trying to say that the software actually facilitates ICE there. Freeman also said revenue from the contract, about $200,000, was not financially material for the company. Well, we should get rid of it. GitHub is just the latest tech companies to face worker resistance to government contracts, particularly those with the Department of Defense. After GitHub canceled that, sorry about that. The GitHub servers were being used by Homeland Security Investigations and Enforcement and Removal Operations Division, amongst others. ICE is a large organization with many divisions, no doubt about that. ICE has set up instances within Homeland Security investigative arms, and this Breska, I think is how to pronounce that. Other important ICE work does is stop. They don't really do very much of that. Times reviewed snapshots of an internal Slack channel after the contract was renewed. That was on September 4th. It appears to show sales workers celebrating a $56,000 upgrade contract with ICE. And there's where the problems are. And some people hoisted up an American flag. Anyway, the parent organization here, Microsoft, has a contract with ICE worth over $8 million. That's according to Recode, and also resisted giving in to employees' demands. Okay. We can assure you that that's not the case. This is a group in Texas, Rayseed. Anyway, thought we'd throw the GitHub story in here. And now to Beto O'Rourke. We'll spend a little time with Beto. This is again from the Los Angeles Times. Beto O'Rourke ends his presidential run as hype fails to match reality, is the headline here. This is by Madeline Mason and Mark Barback. Headline, Des Moines, Iowa. Beto O'Rourke abruptly ended his presidential bid Friday, bowing to the reality of weak fundraising and underwhelming performance that never matched the hype that swept him into the Democratic contest. The former representative from El Paso announced his decision on Twitter, and at rival gatherings in Des Moines, a party bash had kicked off a rush to the February 3rd caucuses, a contest in which Beto hasn't mattered very much. Our campaign has always been about seeing clearly and speaking honestly and acting decisively, he wrote. In that spirit, I am announcing that my service to the country will not be as a candidate or as a nominee. Later, speaking to a small gathering of associative supporters, Chili Riverfoot Park, downtown Des Moines, O'Rourke pledged to remain in the middle of this fight, and he said he would do all he could to help the eventual nominee. This has been an honor of my life, he said. ringed by supporters. He stood on a wooden soapbox with his name stenciled on it. I love you all, and I will see you down the road. And well, Beto actually drove down many roads. His exit was dramatic. It was not unexpected. Come down from the 47-year-old politician. Waging uphill battle for the Senate race that was in Texas. He raised $80 million, built a national following, and he almost defeated Ted Line Cruz. With his toothy grin and tousled hair, O'Rourke was likened to the Kennedys. His fan base included former President Obama, Oprah Winfrey there. He was also subject to an HBO documentary. He was ushered into the presidential contest with his portrait on a Vanity Fair. But the question is, how many people read Vanity Fair? The trajectory was mostly downward from there. There was little to make O'Rourke stand out in the field, but at one point reached to 24 people. His positions were mostly standard gun control, paid family leave, GQBTQ rights, the $15 an hour, and a humane program. His campaign was amateurish, at least before he gave in and surrounded himself with some more seasoned professionals. He was doing better there. This spring, he announced his policy to fight global warming. He was at Yosemite Park, invisible to a national audience for all intents, on a hike with local climate change researcher and an environmental justice advocate. His chances at the presidential level were never really good, and he was never anywhere near top-tier candidates from Jim Henderson, who watched O'Rourke's rise and fall as the head of the Texas Political Project at the University of Texas in Austin. He was in Yosemite, invisible to a national audience. Oops, sorry about that. From the beginning, the attributes that made him seem like an attractive presidential candidate were based on a very different kind of race. Henderson said they were likely to transfer into very different nature of a presidential contest, especially one this crowded. And that was a big problem there. And a big problem for many of these candidates. Finally seemed to find his voice and purpose when tragedy struck El Paso, Texas. Overnight, the former congressman turned his campaign into a crusade for gun control, breaking sharply with others by calling for mandatory buybacks of military assault weapons. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. As a candidate, O'Rourke seemed liberated. He abandoned the conventional stops in Iowa and other early voting states and blazed his more or less followed the path of visiting soup kitchens, rehab centers, scenes of racial and domestic terrorism. But if O'Rourke was energized, voters were less so. He barely registered in the polls. He raised more than $6 million in March in his first 24 hours as a candidate. He pulled in just $4.5 million for the 3 months ending on September the 30th. Henderson has said there's still time for O'Rourke to enter the 2020 contest in Texas against John Cornyn. The conditions now are a lot different than they have been had he gotten in at the beginning, with several Democrats already in the race, but it's a top list of discussion this weekend, no doubt, in Texas. O'Rourke, however, seemed to rule out any interest in the Senate race, as he has over the last several months adamantly and repeatedly with his statement that he has no intention of running for any other office. Within moments of his exit, former rivals took to Twitter to offer their praise, and naturally they would. Elizabeth Warren was committed to ending gun violence and uplifting the voices of victims and their families that made his presidential candidate. Kamala Harris tried to chime in, always speaking from the heart. President Trump, speaking at a rally in Tupelo, Mississippi, was less gracious, no doubt about that. Called him a poor SOB, a pathetic guy. He was pathetic. I wonder what Beto O'Rourke has to say about DJ Trump. Would be a kind of an interesting foray, as one would say. Not sure. We'll stick to the LA Times here. I just saw an article. I believe this was out of the National Enquirer, labeling California hobos paradise. Well, so much for now. I guess we'll do the standardized test scores here. California group demands University UC drop the SAT, alleging it illegally discriminates against disadvantaged students here. A picture here of a young man named Kawana Smith. He is a senior at Valiant Day High School in Watts. He joined other school community leaders to demand they eliminate the SAT and ACT. I didn't know they did the ACT. Anyway, as administrative requirements, when several groups threatened a lawsuit alleging the test violated state civil rights laws by unlawfully discriminating against disabled, low-income, and underrepresented minority students. A letter delivered to the UC Regent by lawyers representing the Compton Unified School District, the Community Coalition, and others demanded the university immediately stop discriminatory practice. That's called demand letter, incidentally. Or face litigation. It marked the first step in what could be the nation's first lawsuit seeking to end the use of the controversial test that has been dropped as an admission requirement by 1,000 colleges and universities across the nation, including the University of Chicago, the University of San Francisco. The ACT and College Board, which SAT took a strong exception to the challenge, but their tests are discriminatory. This has been argued and actually has been proven. The ATC is not discriminatory nor biased, as some spokesman for the ATC, blaming a standardized tests, plural, for difference in education quality and opportunities that exist would not improve the education. The Academic Senate, which sets the system's admission requirements, is studying whether to drop the test and plans to issue recommendations to the region in February. That's what Dorr said. And that UC officials would wait for that review requested by Janice Napolitano. She used to be the governor, incidentally, of Arizona, and was in she headed once Homeland Security. We understand the pressure, particularly when so many of our young folk might be affected by the way in which we provide access to UC there. But however, we've decided we want to get it right. That's what they said. Several regions have expressed impatience to get on with the debate. Chair there, Perez, has cautioned against analysis paralysis. Demand letter, a legal precursor to defying a lawsuit against the system, also says students can't wait. Anyway, back to Kawana Smith, a student there in Watts, who said one of the three students threatening litigation said standardized test requirements are stymieing his dream to get into a good college. He has a 3.56, that's almost a 4, and 3 associate degrees. From LA Southwest College. He said he and his mother, a home care worker who earns just $23,000 a year, have struggled with bouts of homelessness and hunger and can't afford private tutors. There's some people going to jail, incidentally, for trying to juice these tests or elite prep courses. SAT training offered by his school and nonprofits have not been effective in teaching him key test-taking strategies, he said. However, he added he bombed several SAT practice tests because he had no money for breakfast and couldn't concentrate on an empty stomach. I had a relative of mine in Nova Scotia that had the same situation going on. He resigned to lower scores when he takes the test later this year, and worries about his performance will probably shut the door to his dream of getting into UCLA or Berkeley. Standardized test scores are one of 14 factors that they consider. I don't have that up here now Demand letter was sent by public counsel, the Los Angeles pro bono law firm, and 4 other legal firms and nonprofits on behalf of the 3 students. The group also includes the College Access Plan, College Seekers, and Maria Rising and others, and excuse me, and the Dolores Hunter Foundation. I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name. She's very important in Latinos history. The myriad barriers results in huge discrepancy in scores. The letter said last year California, 53% of Asian Americans, 44% of Europeans scored above the 1200. That's the 75th percentile, compared to 12% of Latinos and 10% of of African Americans. The boards and college boards said their organization worked to address inequalities, providing fee waivers to low-income students and free access to test preparation. Provides live stream tutoring. That's Kobe from the ACT, and online practice programs, which is and support for English learners. Anyway, Ralph Rosenblum, a public counsel attorney, said his clients want to end all testing requirements, not simply make them optional as other universities have done. The SAT optional is no more acceptable than the racial discrimination option. And let's see what else we have going here. The Smarter Balance Test is used in California and more than a dozen other states to assess how well K-12 students have mastered English math skills required by standards known as the Common Core. The old Common Core, they just about thrown out. This is Christopher Edley. He is a law professor at Berkeley and co-founder of Opportunity Institute, a nonprofit advocating education equality. Edley said he favors that test because research has shown it performs as well as the SAT, and in predicting first-year college grades, less bias against disadvantaged students, and more advantaged is the 11th grade at public schools already take during the 11th grade. He added that the SAT is designed to produce low, medium, and high scores. All students could do well on a Smarter Balance if they master the content California educators determine they need to know. I remember being involved in litigation. In many of these litigations, standardized tests, whether it be MedCap, that's the medical school, or LSAP, the law school admission test. And basically the studies we had, now this was a long time ago, had determined, and I remember the Baca case, for those who want to go back to it, that these tests were not an indication of how well one would perform as a lawyer. In fact, we had people that performed, excuse me, in the lower percentiles on the LSAT tests and or the graduate record, whichever one, well, particularly for lawyers, and then performed well as civil or criminal litigators. And the other step, obviously, is passing the bar, but most people do eventually pass the bar. So I thought we'd bring this in. Let's move along here. We spent some time on California. We got into testing. And I think we'll save E.J. Dion. He's writing in the Santa Cruz paper, I believe. E.J. Dion, we're polarized, fragmented at the same time. Trump likes that. The Santa Cruz Sentinel. Anyway, let me just check. We'll do the polls, and we'll come back on the Monday Morning Quarterback and deep dive into these polls. This is from Real Clear Politics. And we'll on Friday we may have some. Anyway, this is the Iowa Democratic contest. This is the Time and Senior poll. This has worn up by 3. And in this poll, Warren has 22, Biden has 17, and the judge from South Bend actually 18 here, and Bernie Sanders has 19. So they're all in a statistical dead heap, and here comes Amy at 4. Beto, well, I don't know where Beto was. Anyway, it doesn't really matter now. Anyway, and on the approval rating, ABC has old DJ Trump at 39, The Hill at 46, and we'll look at the Business Independent Daily, very good poll, has him at 39. So DJ is 17 percentage points of disapproval here, and of course Rasmussen had him at 45. This right-wing Hill there at 46. We can forget about that. And I believe on Friday Java we talked about the Pennsylvania primary. Franklin Marshall there, they have him up by 12, and let's see, Liz Warren 18, Bernie 12, and Buttigieg in the single at 8, and Amy Klobuchar is sticking around at 2. And Tulsi Gabbard actually also had 2 there. Yeah, we didn't see Beto showing up there, but anyway, it doesn't really matter very much where Beto is. Nonetheless, this weekend we'll have a Numbers Man report. We've been working on it for some time here. We need to add a few additional things, and we'll have it taken care of. And we'll append Patty Davis's My Father's Library Will Likely Survive the Fires, but the California My Youth is Gone. This is by Patty Davis. I want to append this to the show, period. Nonetheless, this has been the week that was on the 2nd of November 2019. Boston Red in the Jerry Pippen broadcast booth. We'll see you on this channel on the Monday Morning Quarterback. We'll also have This Week in Economics. That is known as the Numbers Man Show on WBRN Radio, the Boston Red Network. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us at Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the iHeart app, and you can find all our presentations. There are many of them in the last few years are there. There's some of the older ones still stuck over at Blog Talk. You can go over and look at those. On Apple Podcasts, I don't think that feed is up to date, but the RSS feed, I believe, is up to date. I need to check on that. And at YouTube, you can find an audio version there. Next year, we'll improve that and get some video versions in there. And that's basically it. Have a good weekend. Good day. Oh, and remember to set your clocks back 1 hour on Sunday night.